Hey guys, what is going on? I made my second track that I've made in a while. The first one I made last week, and to be honest, it kind of sucked. So I started fresh, and I've been working on this for probably like 3, 4 hours, something like that. But I actually kind of like it. I'm going to play it, and then I'll kind of talk about how I made it. It's not totally finished, probably like 80 to 90% there. Mix isn't perfect, but you'll get a sense for what it sounds like. Here we go. All right. So, just a second. There I am. So overall, I like it. I really do. There's a few things that I don't think are totally there, but let me just kind of start with how I even came up with this. So most of the time when I make a track, it's usually me just noodling around on the guitar. And so for the riff up here, so this was actually something I played on the guitar, and out of both laziness to get my guitar to record it and just wanting to experiment with different sounds, I decided to go with this. And so for this, it uses, if it'll load, Isotope Iris. Isotope makes a lot of editing software, so for mastering and things of that nature and mixing, but they also have a synth, and it's very complicated, but it has really cool sounds from it, and so this is what I did. So it's not terribly complex, but I thought it sounded really neat. Overall, I knew I wanted the song to have kind of a Illenium vibe, if you've heard of him before. So he usually has a mixture of acoustic and electric instruments, and the choruses are usually fat, like very heavy, and so that's what I strived for. But let's dive in. So this is just a layered, it's the same thing, but just it's just another preset of the Isotope Iris, and so together they kind of complement each other. Once the verse comes in, I want it really the verse to be a big build-up to the chorus, and so I used Easy Drummer, which is a acoustic drum sampler, and I wanted some sort of a snare groove, but they didn't have anything in the presets, so I had to make it from scratch. Again, nothing complicated, but I think it does add a certain level of realism to the song. The bass drum on Easy Drummer can be a little bit weak, so I added these synth drum bass hits during the first beat of every measure. And then there's some piano kind of peppered in. And the piano is using Contact, and this is by far my favorite piano VST, called the Giant from Contact. It makes some killer sounds from it. So we have that, and then I usually use real bass for especially things that aren't super heavy, like this. Ideally, if I had an actual bass, I would just play that, but it usually sounds pretty good. And then the only other thing in the verse is just this white noise buildup, which I'm not in love with, I'll be honest. So it gets the job done, but I don't know, when I hear it in the mix, it doesn't blow me away. One, I can't hear it that well, and two, it just doesn't cut through the mix. Now the chorus is where it gets pretty intense, and I knew that I wanted some very thick chords, and so that's what I did. So you can kind of see in the piano roll here, I use very stacked chords, and I use extensions. So a lot of these are 7th and 9th chords. So ordinarily those kind of chords are used in jazz, but if you use them in sort of this EDM setting, it can achieve an incredibly thick sound that is very just pleasant to listen to. So I'll just solo the chords to let you listen to that. So kind of just a standard chord progression, but it's really those extended 7th and 9th notes that make it sound all the more, I guess, filling. It's really the only word that comes to my mind. But I'm not going to lie, I pretty much structured this after Illenium makes his drops, which are just these crazy synth sounds that are full as hell. This one, I wanted something to where it wasn't just a static hold. And so what I did was I used an LFO on it, a low frequency oscillator. And so what that is doing is modulating the cutoff. So the cutoff determines how many of the high frequencies are coming through. And so basically what it's doing is just wobbling back and forth. LFOs are also what's used for dubstep to get the wobble, wobble, wobble. all that. But if you use it in this kind of a setting, all it does is make a pulsing sound. And then let's see, the drums are, I didn't talk about this, but I use Battery, which is a sampler that you can put all sorts of stuff in here. It has a lot of factory samples that you can use, and then you can download like millions of random things and put anything in here that you could ever want to have. I keep it fairly simple. I honestly don't use more than about 5 or 6 drum sounds at a time. And all right, so for the chorus, the drums just super easy, 4 on the floor. There's nothing. It's very basic. The bass gets a little bit interesting in the sense that it's just an analog bass. So if you solo that, so depending on how you're listening to that, either through headphones or through your computer speakers, is going to vary quite a bit. If you're listening through headphones, you can probably tell it has a lot of sub bass. But the problem with that is that it would conflict with the bass emitted by the drum. So if I play those two together, you can hear how they kind of clash. So what I did is I put a compressor on the bass, and then I used a side chain, and I made this sort of ghost kick track. So the kick track doesn't really play, but all of it does is modulate the compressor on the bass. And so when you do that, it gives a pumping effect, and this is what it sounds like. Or not. Hold on. And of course it's not working. So there's that. All right, what's the deal? Let's do that. There we go. There it is. Okay. I don't really know what happened. So when you listen to it now, you can hear how it pulsates. So when you add in everything else with it, you can hear how it kind of pulses in and out. And so that gives a lot more room for the bass drum to shine so that it doesn't get so muddy. All right, and let's see, the second verse. Oh, there's also this track here. This just adds a little bit of variety to the track, gives a little bit of some overhead sound. And that's also Isotope Iris. I love that synth, by the way. I usually use Massive. I pretty much have all Native Instruments, materials, not the word, products, but I wanted to branch out a little bit and try this, and I've been like super impressed with it. All right, so the verse is pretty much the same thing, with the exception of having some added drums. So again, I like to incorporate electric and acoustic drums. So for the chorus, it's all electric and analog, and then for the verse, I like to pepper in some real drums just to give a little bit of variety, so it doesn't sound just like your, run-of-the-mill EDM house song. Granted, this isn't really a house song because it's a way slower than the typical like 120 to 128 beats per minute. So there's that, and then it goes back to the snare roll. Back to the chorus, same thing. God, I love those chords. And then we get to the bridge. Historically, I'm not really great at writing bridges, but I just decided to keep it pretty simple. And it keeps a lot of the same melodies from before, but the main difference is that the bass progression is different. So it's this descending bass progression that I think gives a really good build up to the final chorus. And then at the very end of the bridge, I revert back to that beginning riff. I thought that if I were to go immediately to the chorus after the bridge, it'd be a little bit too predictable. So if I did this, it would be more surprising. The only thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is the volume change between here and the chorus is pretty intense. But if there were vocals on this, then maybe that could be eased a little bit. The last chorus is, again, the same thing. Ultimately, I would like to add something to make it a little bit different. I've experimented with doing some things, but overall, I just never really liked it that much. So when vocals get put on here, maybe whatever vocalist goes on here, they can do a little bit of something a little extra on the last chorus, and then it just ends with the thick chords because I just love them, and why not end on it? Oh, God, I love the way those sound. Yeah, so I would say, like I said, this is probably 80 to 90% done. Usually I put more acoustic instruments, or real instruments rather, so I usually put guitar on my tracks, but I'll be honest, I was just kind of lazy today to get my guitar and break it out, so most everything was just played on the keyboard. My personal flow is I try to use as few samples as possible just to try to boost my or just to think on my feet on how I can create sounds that I want. And yeah, it's almost done. Like I said, I probably need to change this sweep and add some variety to the choruses. But other than that, it just needs vocals. And if you're watching this and you're a vocalist, get in contact with me and let's see if we can make something happen. Especially if you like the song, obviously. If you don't like it, then, don't bother. All right, that's all I got. Hopefully you found this maybe enjoyable if you're into music. Otherwise, well, oh well. All right, talk to you guys later. Bye.